I'm sure that you read about this. Roxanne and Peter Pulitzer's divorce rocked the high society world of Palm Beach. Tales of sordid sexual behavior and drug and alcohol abuse littered headlines from coast to coast. When it was over, Roxanne lost custody of her 2 children and saw herself exiled from the world of wealth and privilege that she once knew. And she is here, as she has been on several talk shows, to talk about it because you write about it in your book. Good morning to you.
Good morning,
Let's just get it out of the way. I mean, let's get it out of the way. This business of making love to a trumpet and having countless lovers, both male and female. I mean, they portrayed you, or you act, you know, you're portrayed as a terrible woman.
There's not enough time in the day for me to have done all those things, but the trumpet obviously is the most sensational. And that came about because they were trying to say that my religious beliefs were not of the norm, and so therefore I was unfit to raise my children. My ex-husband being Episcopalian and mine going more towards spiritualist views. And so they subpoenaed all my metaphysical literature, my Edgar Cayce books, The Road Less Traveled. I mean, everything was there in the courtroom. And they also had proof that I had gone to psychics and mediums in my life. And of course, the trumpet was brought in because my ex-husband and I had gone to a trumpet seance. And
What is that?
Okay, well, I had never been to one myself either at that time. And he became fascinated with my religious beliefs as he was turning 50. I think suddenly my belief, of course, is reincarnation, karma, we're going on, and he all of a sudden got a little bit afraid of that, is it going to be all over, and, you know, am I going to be in the ground type thing, and that's it. And so he started reading some of my books, and he wanted to go to some psychics, which I set him up with some of them that I had gone to, and he wanted to go to a trumpet seance, which is where you go and there's a medium there, and he gives you individual messages. There was about 10 people, I think. And in the center of the room sits this trumpet, which is just symbolism. It does not move. And it is symbolic of Michael the Archangel summoning the angels, actually. And so at the end of this trumpet seance, which I had arranged, we flew to New York. The man was so excited to have had Peter Pulitzer there that he presented him with this trumpet. So we took the trumpet home with us on the plane to Palm Beach. And it ended up in my walk-in closet, which was the larger of the two. And so it was sitting there the entire afternoon that I was testifying on this, you know, looking very odd, but it sat there, and everybody was getting their laughs, of course. And then, lo and behold, the next morning, of course, the New York Press ran this headline of myself, the trumpet, and it says, "I slept with the trumpet," in quotes. Now, you can search 20,000 pages of transcripts. You will never find that quote, but the New York Post doesn't know.
They really
report things correctly.
Yeah.
But anyway, I became known as this girl who did something with this trumpet. I mean, sexually. I have been asked that question. I will be known as that forever.
That's why I wanted to get out of the way.
But anyway, I called the reporter. I said, just tell me, how did you ever come to this conclusion? Tell me about it. And he said, well, Roxanne, he said, listen, he says, the trumpet's in the walk-in closet. The walk-in closet's in the bedroom. The bed is in the bedroom. You sleep with the trumpet.
Oh,
I think, well, I'm sleeping with a lot of things then.
But you know, the judgment, and you put the judgment at the end of the book, and it absolutely makes you look like the worst human being that ever lived. This judge did not like you.
No, no.
He took away your children.
He did. He did. And I think, of course, there again, there's many things. One never knows. One could go if, was there payoff? Who knows? Was it just the power structure? One could go on forever with that. But the judge, it's an interesting case because he was a criminal judge for 20 years. He came to civil division only for 1 year. That was to try our case. And he was my ex-husband's age, a man's man as he saw himself, a fisherman, a hunter, this or that, but didn't have any children. I think it's very interesting how one can try a child custody case. I don't think judges should be allowed to try them unless they have children of their own, because you cannot possibly walk in a parent's shoes. You do not know the emotional bond that exists between a father and a child and a mother and a child. And it's interesting also, he worships his father. He was raised by his father. His real mother deserted him when he was 3 or 4. She hates her. So, I mean, when you look at all these things, you don't know if you're paying for the emotional gremlins of, you know, who knows.
But the truth is you made mistakes.
Oh, the truth is we both made mistakes.
Yeah.
We both made mistakes. But keep in mind, the mistakes made, we were there doing them together. That's the interesting part.
Yeah, talk
if
about
we did
that
cocaine, we did them together. Menage a trois, there was not one person there.
And
there was 3 people.
The menage a trois was Peter's idea, you write. He wanted another woman with you.
Well, it was his fantasy. At the time, it sounded a little strange to me, but since then, I haven't not run into one man that has not had that fantasy one time in his life.
It is said that most men have that fantasy.
I think it is, and so it took a little while it took a year of him talking to me about that, for me to do that, simply because I was very unfamiliar with it, and I'd never done it, and I was a little shy of it. And it actually was given an ultimatum that if I did not do this, he was going to bring in 2 strangers. And I just really didn't want a stranger in my marriage. I did not want a stranger fulfilling one of his fantasies for him. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to be meeting a girl on Friday afternoons, you know, and I will not be a part of that. And up until that point, there was never adultery in our marriage. I mean, he wasn't having affairs, I wasn't. We had a very happy sexual life. And I just thought that the road for me to choose with that ultimatum would be to participate and be there rather than let him go the other way. And I'm still happy I did that. I do not regret that.
But then afterwards, there was a woman who was a friend of yours, and it was reported that the kids saw her in your bed and that you
No, that was Jacky.
That was the same woman.
That was the same one. Now, that was a very interesting testimony. Of course, Herbert brought up the menage a trois, and that he was there, and I forced him to go to bed with 2 girls type thing. And then there was a mate who testified that he came up to the house from the boat, one that was working for my husband, and instead of using the phone that's outside the house, he said he had to come into the house, and we were in a bedroom with the door open in the middle of the day, Jacky naked, myself in a sheer negligee, and of course, where were the children and the nannies and the cook and the butler when you need them? No, but I mean, it was just unbelievable testimony, which again, I thought nobody was going to believe this, but I guess the people did.
You started out this interview saying there might have been payoffs.
Well,
Is that, looking back, what you
I think there's a lot of possibilities. I'm not saying I have no proof of that.
Yeah.
I've been asked that many, many times. I would tend to think, though, my gut feeling is more of that it was a power situation. The name, the money behind it, Palm Beach being very close-knit. I wasn't from Palm Beach. I think I really felt the power more than I did anything else. But then, of course, behind power is money.
You're from upstate New York in a little town, and suddenly you meet Peter Pulitzer, you fall in love, and you're in a world that's certainly new to you.
I know, new and didn't want me. I've never had trouble making friends, and I couldn't understand. I was living with him for a year before we got married. I was 23, and I kept trying to be friends with these women, and I just was having no luck at all. And so then I thought I couldn't understand it. Of course, I've never been in a situation like that. And of course, everybody knew we were living together because Palm Beach is very small. And the invitations would come to the house, and they would say, to Mr. Peter Pulitzer, and then at the bottom it would say, P.S. Please come alone. And I thought, oh dear, because they really didn't care who I was. I mean, I was not accepted before they even got to know me. So
you never felt comfortable? Or did you just lean on?
Actually, I got to the point where it didn't bother me because I was so happy with Herbert and intent on making that work that Palm Beach, I have a real good sense of myself, and so it became old very quickly.
Let's just let people know, not confuse them. Herbert and Peter are one and the same.
Yes.
He asked you to sign a post-marital agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the beginning of the end? Because you were flying a little on your own. I mean, you were saying, I'm doing this my way, stepping out on your own independently.
Well, he hadn't wanted to have the children, and I wouldn't marry him unless he let me have one, and I listened real well, of course, and had 2. And then there was that conflict within the family structure, which was very difficult because he wanted me to travel and leave the children, and I didn't want to, and that was actually when it started. But the post-marital, which was brought in, I think, in either December of 1980 or January of 1981 was when it really started to fall apart. He knew he was losing control, and I hadn't signed a premarital. And the post-marital, frankly, which was very ignorant of me, I'd never realized the children were an issue because he never wanted them, and he never made a verbal anything to say he was going to go after the children. I mean, it just never entered my mind. And in this post-marital agreement, the last paragraph, which petrified me, was the fact that if I signed that, for instance, that day, the next day he could have divorced me. That would have been it, final. And I said, I don't think we should sign something when your veins are pulsing and, you know, you're so angry. I said, let's get marital counseling. Let's not. I was very afraid he was going to do this within the next few days. And I said, no, I'm not going to sign that. And that's when he said, well, with my power, my money, my name, then I'm going to destroy you. Well, I should have listened, I guess. But, of course, 2 weeks later, he sued me for child custody. So I became unfit somewhere there in the 2-week period. And of course, in the Florida courts, you're not allowed to bring in a postmarital agreement. All I wanted to show by bringing that in was he had given me total custody here 2 weeks ahead of time, but we weren't allowed to bring it in. The judge didn't want it.
Yeah. Where does love figure into all of this? I mean, did you love
Very
him?
deeply. Well, obviously, we dated for a year after the trial. Love, this was never about love. This was about control.
How can you go through what the two of you went through and then see each other on a loving basis?
Well, I'll tell you, if your child ever came home and told you, Mom, I just murdered somebody, the most horrendous crime you can think of, you do not stop loving your child, I'll tell you.
Yeah, but if my child came home and said, Mom, I think I'm going to murder you, I might think differently. I mean, that's basically what he tried to do.
Not really. It was more like he was like a child in a lot of ways. I had 3 little boys. It was his ego, and it was his way of looking at absolute war where he had to destroy me. The only way he could destroy me was to take my children.
How much of you was a child acting out, doing drugs, staying out, dancing, playing,
Oh, there's
partying?
no excuse for any of that. Of course. I mean, we all do drugs because we want to do drugs. I was 28. I'd never tried it. We were there. He'd never tried it. We tried it. There is absolutely no excuse I can give you.
Palm
we
Beach.
wanted to try it.
Drugs on the table? Are they
Drugs on the
everywhere?
table in 1978. Drugs on the front cover of Time, Newsweek, glamorous, non-addictive, in thing. You remember that. We didn't know until the 80s all the bad ramifications of cocaine.
You lived every mother's nightmare, losing Mac and Zach, your 2 sons. They were 5 years old. They're 10 now.
Yeah.
How are they now toward you?
Oh, they're much, much better. It was a huge shock because they did not know their father. And of course, I made a huge error, huge, in the sense of they had asked me when they became aware it was a child custody. Mac asked me one night at dinner, he said, no matter what, Mom, I will always live with you, won't you? I never anticipated losing my children, which is something I always tell parents, either parent, if they're involved in this, there are no forevers or nevers, or you don't know what that judge is going to do. It doesn't matter whether you're fit or not. It has nothing to do with it. Mac, of course, thought I had lied to him, and it had taken me a long time to build that up because he really interpreted that in his, you know,
Yeah, Mommy will protect me.
Yeah, Mommy will protect me, Mommy will be there, and then Mommy wasn't there. But we went through psychiatric counseling together. Mac and Zach were cut back a year in school. The consistency I've had, I go to the schools every week, I sit in their classroom, I call them every night. We make very good use of the time that we do have. And I may be physically apart from them, but emotionally they know I'm not. And of course, being identical twins has been tremendous because that relationship is closer than they'll ever be to either Herbert or myself.
Bottom line, I mean, what would you have done differently?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing, no. I have 2 beautiful human beings came from that marriage. That marriage was meant to be. I had many more good times than bad. I had 5.5 good years, 1.5 bad years. I refuse to give the power to the negative here.
But you've learned something about yourself.
Sure.
Obviously,
sure.
you would change. You would not.
But you don't learn until you've done those things wrong. If I were this perfect human being, what lessons would I learn? No regrets. I do it all.